Um, I am part of the Legal Services Microenterprise team. I'm here today with Tracy James, our managing attorney for the team, who will be popping in to participate some. And she'll also be managing our chat today. So if you have any questions as this presentation progresses, feel free to type them in the chat. And then Stephanie Strickland, our staff attorney today, is going to be hosting and presenting. So without any further ado, Stephanie.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us. As Julie said, I am Stephanie Strickland, and both of us are new to the Microenterprise team as of September of this year. So we're really excited to be here and to be able to share information about our program with you all as potential volunteers. Today, my goal is to talk to you about what we do in the Microenterprise Program, how you can help, and how helping can benefit you. And you all should have already received a copy of the agenda, but just to briefly overview, we're going to do a brief introduction to what the CED Microenterprise Program is, supporting microenterprise with Pro Bono, working with clients as a volunteer attorney. We will talk about some common legal issues for startups, as well as some of our successes and opportunities. And at the end, we will be happy to take any additional questions. As Julie stated, if you have questions as we go along, feel free to enter those into the chat and we will address them as we can. Okay, so in 2011, after an extensive needs assessment that involved interviews with more than 60 area service agencies working with entrepreneurs and nonprofits, as well as meetings with other community stakeholders, the need for free legal assistance in the St. Louis area for entrepreneurs and fledgling businesses became quite clear. And in response to that, Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, one of the area's largest not-for-profit law firms, decided to create the Community Economic Development Program, as we will refer to CED throughout this presentation. And as you see on the screen and would have received in your materials, we just briefly listed some of our mission and objectives, as well as some of our goals. Our main goals are to eliminate poverty by increasing wealth to neighborhoods, increasing income, and creating jobs, as well as helping startups become an anchor in their community. We hope that these services that we provide of transactional legal work will contribute to closing the economic gap and disparities that exist within our communities. On our next slide, just a brief overview of the legal support that we do provide. We work with entrepreneurs and nonprofit founders who often come to us with various legal needs as they are starting off or growing their company. We do make sure that all of our clients meet certain financial eligibility, and other guidelines that we'll get into later in the presentation. We match our clients with competent attorneys and who are licensed with the Missouri Bar, either one of our staff attorneys, but hopefully we'll have more volunteers that can help with that work. And the whole goal of this is to help our clients avoid potentially devastating legal issues and help their businesses grow. So how does Microenterprise reach those in need? We provide outreach. We do workshops and presentations. A lot of this outreach is done with our community partners. We conduct one-on-one legal clinics, as well as provide one-on-one client representation to those clients who do qualify. A big part of what we do is, as we said, recruiting volunteer attorneys to do work for the Microenterprise Program. Our team consists of 2 staff attorneys, a managing attorney, and 2 paralegals. However, our reach would not be nearly as impactful without volunteers like you. We also rely on a host of community partners to help us build our outreach. This next slide just kind of gives you a brief overview of the demographics of our clients. Majority of them are minorities. We've also worked with a number of individuals who are members of the immigrant community. As you see, about 55% of our clients are for-profit businesses and about 45% of our clients are not-for-profits. The next slide kind of gives you a little bit of a breakdown of the economic diversity that exists within our client base. As you see, the largest number, 71% of our clients are between 0 to 125% over the federal poverty level. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, a family of 4 would not, to be eligible, they would have to make no more than $70,000 a year. I think that this is important to kind of highlight because I think when people look at low income clients, what that looks like to them can vary. And we can serve in our program, we can serve clients who are up to 300% above the federal poverty income level. So, or excuse me, poverty guidelines. And so we do work with some clients who might not be what people think of as indigent per se. Going on to the next slide. So what can volunteer attorneys do in the microenterprise programs? We are looking for volunteer attorneys to host presentations and workshops, as well as staff legal information sessions and clinics, as well as provide one-on-one client representation. In terms of the presentations and workshops, some of our volunteers come to us to specifically teach on substantive topics that they have previously covered. They may be an expert in that area and already have pre-made presentations. That's excellent. We accept that. We also have some pre-made PowerPoints for individuals who can contribute some of their time to do a presentation, but may not want to put a full presentation together. And I have some of those commonly discussed topics that we already have presentations on listed below. You can present in partnership with community groups and interested members of the public as well. And the time commitment is normally between 1 hour and 3 hours. So we do have monthly presentation opportunities that we are open to working with our volunteers on. And as I stated, these are just some of the topics that we've covered in the past. So we're always welcome to new and more specialized topics if you have any ideas. For our legal information sessions, or as we call them, clinics, these are normally 30-minute sessions where an individual has an opportunity to sign up and speak with one or more attorneys and ask questions about their startup. This is a great opportunity for firms to staff. I know a lot of firms have pro bono coordinators. This is a good opportunity for younger attorneys to get involved and be able to connect with the public. All of our attendees, they are not considered clients. We make sure that they sign waivers and know that the legal advice that they're being given is on a one-time only basis if they're not becoming a client. And as you can see in this slide, we've listed a number of our previous and current partners that we work with. In terms of the one-on-one client representation, how you can help, you will receive newsletters. If you're not already receiving newsletters from us, we send those out pretty frequently. We'd like for you to keep an eye out for cases where you can help and then inform us if there's a specific case that you would like to work on. We will get into more of the specifics of how that process works later in the presentation, but just so you know, our program handles all of the paperwork and we offer malpractice insurance for our volunteers. We also offer legal training if needed. I know oftentimes some of the barriers that we've heard in terms of volunteers with our program, they'll say, well, I don't really practice in all of the areas of law. How do I know that I can help a client? Like I said, we have checklists. We're happy to talk to people individually and discuss some of the case needs with our individual clients. The length of representation of a client will depend on the difficulty of the work and what's needed on a case-by-case basis. So that's something we're happy to work with you on. And next, I'm going to have Tracy James, our managing attorney, talk to you a little bit about the impact of pro bono work and how it has helped our program over the last several years. As I stated, I am newer, and she can speak to this a little more specifically. So Tracy?
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate it. I've been the managing attorney for the Microenterprise CED program since 2016, and noticed that the Pro Bono Impact just for 2019, I mean, this has kind of grown from the beginning that Stephanie had mentioned back in 2011. And so what you see here is pre-COVID, and it's a lot, it's very, very robust for what we do. This is when we just had 2 attorneys and 1 paralegal. And so we had 165 events. There was a lot of things going on site where we had pre-screened people to come in for clinics. And then we also went out and partnered with our community partners to do legal information sessions out in the St. Louis metro region. And that included other just outreach events where we're just tabling, or we're actually doing presentations, or volunteers are doing presentations. And a lot of this, when you're looking at this, it's not just us, but it is our volunteer attorneys in general. And then we also had 7 regular ongoing clinics with our partners that were, some periodic, either it's monthly or bi-monthly. And at least 5 of the 7 were staffed, or want to say, sponsored by law firms and law departments. We also offer nonprofit entrepreneur clinics, both types. And right now, those are 30 active community partners as of 2019. So you see that we do have some involvement, but this has definitely been impacted by COVID here this year. But thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, and so also just kind of let you, if you see the numbers of 2011 to 2018, this is kind of just a snapshot that how many we've either recruited and how many have given their time of volunteers. And we have a couple of volunteer accountants as well. And we're always looking forward to having other like paralegals and other legal support staff assist. But this is a big, you see a big trajectory going up, increasing in some way from just a couple of volunteer attorneys at the very beginning in 2011 to probably reaching over 300, I think, 333 at the end of 2018. So you see that we have tried to engage our volunteer lawyer community to do this, and we've reached a lot. And so this is, our aim, as Stephanie had said before, is to try and reach as many people as we can who can help build wealth for themselves, create jobs, and then really rebuild the community.
Definitely, definitely. And so as you see on the screen, there is a document that you should have received in your materials that will give you the opportunity to sign up to volunteer. But before you do that, you might be wondering, like, what's in it for me? Like, why should I volunteer with the Microenterprise Program? Well, outside of just your Missouri rules, Rule 4, 6.1, the voluntary pro bono publico service, I'd like to always remind myself, honestly, not just other people, but I constantly remind myself of my obligation to render service that is in the public interest. And this is a great opportunity for you to do that. So not only would you be doing work that would essentially further your ethical obligations as an attorney, but it's also extremely rewarding. This type of work, when you're working with individuals who really need you and who may have come basically just like with nowhere else to turn, that can be a very rewarding experience in the life of a lawyer, particularly young lawyers. And whether you're a younger lawyer or older lawyer, we actually do have one particular lawyer who is retired who helps in our program, and they're very instrumental in the work that we do. And so, there are several reasons that we can give you that will help you, but the practice experience is another definitely plus. When I came to Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, I didn't have a background specifically in transactional law. I used to be a public defender. I've worked as a civil prosecutor for a county government before. So I've kind of been different areas of the spectrum. So this is a great opportunity to learn other areas of law, particularly if you are a younger lawyer and looking to gain more experience. And we can go to the next slide, please. So working with clients as a volunteer attorney, you might be wondering what that looks like. Our next slide just kind of gives a broad overview of that process from beginning to end. And the following slides are going to kind of flesh those details out just a little bit more, okay? And so the first step is a step in which our team manages. That's the eligibility side. As I previously mentioned, the client has to meet the federal poverty guidelines. They can't be more than 300% above those guidelines. Our staff manages that, makes sure that they don't have more than $7,500 in assets. There's some more nuances there that we don't necessarily have to get into, but some of the things, just so you know, we do look to try to make sure that that person has a business plan. Sometimes it might be if it's a business that's already in operation and that's been going for a while, that might be one exception. But for the most part, we just want to make sure and determine the legal work that needs to be done, and make sure if it's a not-for-profit that they serve our client population and that they pass our conflict check. Okay, and the next slide discusses our screening of the client. And that generally is a step that we have some volunteers who help us with. We'll set up a meeting with that client so that there can be a couple of attorneys on the line and basically do some issue spotting, see what legal work the client may need and help them flesh out what issues they have. They may come with one specific question and find out in a clinic that they actually do have other legal needs. So we try to address all of those things on the front end. And the next step is that's the confidential interview form. This is a step that we manage. And again, our volunteers support us with that step in determining the client's needs and readiness to proceed. We generally will have the attorney, the staff attorney that's on that call, or if it's a volunteer attorney, to complete that form. And the next step would be drafting a summary that would go to Tracy, our managing attorney, for her approval on what matters we can open at this time. We handle this step again, but again, this is just so you know that only the most qualified clients are reaching you, our volunteers. So ultimately, the last step is we send that case out. After we do that case summary, we will put it on what we call distribution, which is generally via a newsletter, and we'll send it out. That is what it will look like to you. It will tell you what type of business or not-for-profit it is and what the specific legal needs are. You will also have an opportunity to take that case, particularly if you were in the screening process. That would essentially give you first dibs on working with that client because you're already familiarized with them. So that's something to keep in mind. However, this is just so you know what it looks like and how you can select cases that you may be interested in working in. I also want to point out while we're on this slide, you can see, for example, this case has a IP trademark matter and a copyright matter. So let's just pretend that there's a contract matter on there as well. And you say, well, I am only interested in the intellectual property aspect of this case. You can certainly let us know that you are interested, but that you're not comfortable or you just don't have the time to handle the contract matter. I want to make sure I put that out there so that people know that when you are volunteering with our program, we try to meet you where you are and where you would like to help us. So if you ever see a case on distribution and there's only one aspect of that case that you can handle, that's certainly an opportunity that we can provide to you. the process of becoming a CED client. We want more volunteers, just so you know, so that we don't have to risk having to turn any of our clients away, okay? We do rely on our volunteer attorneys to supplement our 3 attorney staff. If no one volunteers on these cases, after a few weeks, generally one of our in-house attorneys will be assigned to the case. Okay, but if our CED attorneys have too high of a caseload, we would be in the position where we would have to decline cases. And that's why we need more volunteers to help. We don't want to turn people away. Okay, as I mentioned before, you can split up legal needs. We do recommend attorneys that are with law firms to take an entire case if they can and act as a managing attorney to assign those matters internally. That's another way in which this can be handled. It's a great attorney development opportunity for associates to get some managing attorney skills. But as I said, we've also found that many specialists would rather, if you just rather take one portion of the case, we can work with you on that as well. The next slide, essentially, this is the client representation timeline, okay? Once you email us and say you want to take a case, what we will do is we will send the conflict information over to the specific attorney. If you're a solo practitioner, you run that conflict check. If you are with a firm, you would have your firm run that conflict check. Once the conflict clears, we would notify, or at least once we're notified that you all have cleared the contact on your end, we would notify that volunteer lawyer and the client of the representation. We have our own retainer agreement that specifies the scope of the work that needs to be done. And you as a solo practitioner or your firm may also require its own in addition, and that is completely fine. Okay, once a case is assigned to you, we ask that attorneys contact clients within 1 week of notification, because essentially this is your case now, and that's a great way to just keep the flow going with the client, keeping in communication with the clients. What we do on our end is we hope to provide additional support to you as volunteer attorneys. We have forms in our office. We have checklists of specific legal issues, essentially outlines if you were to need any of those things. So as a volunteer attorney, we always want our volunteer attorneys to know that feel free to reach out to us at any time. One of our attorneys can also consult with you on any particular matters if you have questions. Our job is to make you feel supported, and we want to make sure that you do. Each case or attorney will have their own paralegal outreach coordinator. That would be Julie Bowman or Richard, depending on the geographic area of your client. And what they do is just essentially manage the case, reach out to you every once in a while, about 30 to 60 days, to receive a update on the client work that's being done. So the next slide will show you a case update form. This is the form that we ask that our volunteer attorneys use to keep us updated on any completed legal work or documents that have been finalized. We ask that you log your hours on this form as well. We put that information in our system for our compliance purposes, our funding purposes. We have to keep track of those things. And you may also want to keep track of those things if you do have a pro bono coordinator with your firm. It'll help you track your hours and transmit that information to them. Once you have a particular matter, if you take a full case and that had a few matters, once you get one matter done, notify us, please, and we will make sure we get you a closing letter along with a questionnaire. And that would include either a case update or a closure form, just depending on where you are. So if you're closing out a case, we ask you just give us a closure form. It's important that we just know what all work has been done on a case. Again, for our compliance purposes. In terms of managing a case, our goal is for each pairing to be positive for both the attorney and the client. Now, we live in the real world, so we know that every match might not always be the best match. Okay, so we're looking to get that on the front end if at all possible. If you run into any issues, feel free to reach out to us for support. And what we find most time is that if there are any communication issues, most of the time they can be resolved. Okay, just remember that we are here to support you with any of those types of matters. Another issue that comes up sometimes in terms of managing these cases with our volunteer attorneys is that there have been cases where an attorney might not be able to continue that representation. If you are with a firm, we do ask that you try to get that case reassigned within your firm, just to meet that initial ethical obligation for your firm. If there are problems with that, please contact us if you are considering getting off a case, and we will definitely meet you where you are and do what we need to do. So next, we're going to talk about some typical issues that that we see people run into with our clients, or that sometimes we have with our clients. The first one is, I don't know if it could be considered an issue, but it's something to keep in mind. A lot of our clients have never used the services of a lawyer before. So it's important that we set our expectations at that first contact with our clients. Um, those expectations are generally what's the scope of your representation, trying to figure out what's the best communication style for both you, the attorney, as well as for the client. If you prefer communication by email, let that person know, but you might want to check that they have the proper technology to be able to communicate with you on a regular basis. Again, thinking about our client base and how some of our clients may have certain limitations, it's just really important to get an idea of that. For example, during COVID, I have had to meet, we meet with our clients virtually. We're not meeting in person at this time. However, I found that a couple of my clients, for one reason or the other, either they don't have access to a smartphone or they don't know how to navigate that technology properly. And so I just had to adjust to make a phone call. And it was pretty much that simple. So just an example of setting those communication expectations early. Um, and also in that same vein, I'll kind of skip down to another one because it's the expanded scope of work. When we're setting expectations, something to keep in mind is that sometimes clients have things that come up along the way. They may have additional issues that have nothing to do with the retainer agreement. So I would just encourage you to remind them of the work that you've been retained to do, unless you can see that there's some immediate need that they have that needs to be addressed before you can do that work. Just refer back to us and we can either update that retainer agreement or change things as they need to be. That may also speak to another issue that we commonly see, what some people may call high maintenance clients. These aren't necessarily bad clients, but they may just be clients that are might come off as needy. They may have lots of questions. So I think one way to address that is just communicating regularly with your client, setting meetings regularly. One thing I like to do is to schedule my next check-in with my clients while I am on a call with them, just so they don't have to wonder how long is it going to be or email me every day or what have you. Sometimes clients can fall out of contact. And I want to talk about this one a little bit just to kind of place some perspective. So I want everyone to keep in mind that a lot of our clients are starting businesses and they are also working full-time jobs at the same time. So there have been issues with some clients where they may need to reschedule, they might not show up, might not be able to get in touch with them. Again, I think setting those expectations in the beginning, making sure you have the best time to reach a person, all of those things are going to be very helpful tips to making sure that you can keep up the communication with your client. Another thing to think about is, just what are those person's social supports? Are they working parents? Are they single parents? Are they single? Are they married? These are things that can sometimes cause some communication issues, but I find that once you understand them and have a plan to address them, it's usually not a big deal. But if you ever have any issues, we want our volunteer attorneys to know, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to, if we need to send correspondence or what have you to reach that client, we certainly will. Last on the list of potential issues that we see with our clients, sometimes a client's business does fail to move forward. That's just a reality in the entrepreneurial world. Just remember there are a lot of outside factors that can affect that, not necessarily the motivation or cooperation of the person. The biggest thing I can think of right now is COVID-19. We've had clients who have had to either shut down businesses or pivot in their business model in order to be able to move forward and support their families. The next slide just kind of fleshes out just a little bit more. I mean, it's essentially some of the things that I said, but communicating with your client, some of the things to keep in mind is awareness of their educational background. You may have a client who has a GED or doesn't have a GED, or you might have a client who has a PhD. I think the biggest thing is to not make any assumptions about the client because they are a client of legal services, and just kind of, it's fine to ask questions. In that initial meeting, sometimes you can pretty much gather, if a person is following you, but I find that it's also good to just check in with that person, especially when you're talking about legal issues, and make sure that they are following you and ask them if they have any questions, if you're making sense, things like that. The other thing to be on the lookout for is reducing legalese or legal jargon. Try to use plain language when possible. And I know sometimes as lawyers, we may want to, use certain legal terms, but our clients may not always understand them. So if you do, just make sure you try to break down what something means, or just ask the person if they understand. We also included in your materials some helpful tips for communicating with clients. So you can find some more helpful tips in your materials. So we're going to move on to common legal issues for startups. Our next slide is an illustration of common examples of the type of work that we do. So as you can see, it's very varied and it covers many different areas of law. We work to identify what the person's legal needs are before they are assigned to you as a client. A lot of the things that we see are formation issues. It could be licensing, just trademark, real estate, not-for-profit governance, contracts. So there are many different areas in which our clients could use your assistance. There are also some areas of law that we do not provide service for. One of those is patents. We don't do litigation in our program. However, sometimes we'll have a case and at some point in providing the transactional legal services, that client may have some litigation to arise. And what we generally try to do is refer them to or try to check in with our volunteer attorneys to see if anyone can handle that matter. But litigation out the gate is not something that we would take on or assign initially to our volunteer attorneys. We don't represent landlords with 5 or more tenants. That's generally because we do have a housing program and we don't really want to have to deal with those conflicts. We don't do business dissolution services or bankruptcy work. And you can also see some of the types of businesses that we don't perform legal work for. That would include things like adult entertainment businesses, businesses that sell weapons. We don't do liquor license work. So just kind of gives you an idea of how our model is. And we also don't handle client funds. We perform the transactional legal work. If there are fees for the specific legal things, such as filing a trademark, the client is responsible for that fee. Some of the most common legal issues that we also see arise with our clients are things that a lot of times will speak to the fact that they might not have had legal counsel in the beginning. We often see clients who are operating without any legal structure whatsoever. We see clients that have relied solely on LegalZoom or the internet to draft their legal documents. Um, Lots of things that we have to address reactively, unfortunately, sometimes, but that's the importance of our outreach. We try to reach out to the community and help people on that front end, but we also correct these structural issues. If we see someone operating without a legal structure, then we try to help them with properly forming their business. The next slide is a breakdown. This is a visual breakdown of the 2020 open cases that we had as of October 1st. And you can see the largest portion is deal with contracts. So a lot of contract reviews, contract drafting, and entity formation. Formation issues. Speaking of formation issues, we're going to flesh this out a little bit just because this is, I almost like to think of as like the bread and butter of what we do, is making sure that people have their legal entities formed properly. These things, you see that some of the things that we consider is what type of liability would fall upon a client in case they were to be sued, taxation issues, the ongoing requirements that, ongoing requirements to maintain an entity. A individual oftentimes will want to consider those things in making the decision as to whether they want to have a sole proprietorship versus a partnership, corporation, or a limited liability company. Most of our clients do come to us either with LLCs already formed or the idea in their head that they want an LLC. So just to give you kind of a brief overview of the types of legal entities, I'm going to kind of go through that. In terms of sole proprietorships, the benefit of the main characteristic of a sole proprietorship is that there's unlimited liability for business debt. There's no formal action that's necessary to form a sole proprietorship, and that sole proprietor has complete control over their business. So they don't need to consult with anyone to make their business decisions. We oftentimes see a lot of people who are operating in this capacity if they have not yet formed an LLC. In terms of a partnership, if you remember from law school, there are two types of partnerships, general and limited. Partners are personally liable for all business debts and obligations, and generally each partner can bind the business to a contract or a business deal. So try to pretty much let our clients know it's really important to make sure if you're going to enter into a partnership with someone, you want to make sure it's someone that you have a good relationship with and that you can trust. In terms of partnerships, a partnership has to follow certain corporate formalities, has to hold annual shareholders and directors meetings, keep minutes of those meetings and major decisions, as well as issue stock certificates to shareholders. The owner's personal assets are protected from creditors of the corporation, and liability insurance is generally something that is important for the client to be advised on as it relates to this type of business. Then we move on to the C Corp. In a C Corp, the business records and transactions are separate from the owners, okay? And they have to adequately invest in the corporation. There's an exception to the protection. If you personally injure someone, if you sign personal guarantees, if you fail to deposit taxes withheld from the employee's wages, fraudulent or illegal activities, these are all things that are going to be exceptions to the protection that folks are often seeking in this type of business entity. The business records are also kept separate from those of the owners. In terms of insurance, if you personally injure someone while driving a car for business purposes, they usually won't be protected against personal or corporate unpaid debts. Okay, now to contrast the S Corp, that's used to be the only choice for businesses wanting to be taxed on their individual tax returns. A S Corp cannot have more than 100 shareholders. Each shareholder must be a U.S. citizen. It enjoys the limited liability of a corporate shareholder, but pays income tax as a sole proprietor. And you first must create a regular C Corp. Okay, to obtain S Corp status, all shareholders must sign and file the IRS Form 2553. And then last, the most common one we deal with, the LLCs, they are formed by filing articles of organization with the Secretary of State's office. I believe it's currently $50 online to file that. And there are a few ongoing formalities. There's no stock certificates. You don't have to worry about a board of directors. Officers are optional. So people often find this type of structure a lot easier to deal with. There's also no personal liability if done correctly. A LLC is owned by its members. There's flexible ownership and management structure. An LLC is managed by members or a manager that's chosen by the members. That's something important that I always make sure to point out to people and make sure that they have that filed properly on their form. There's pass-through taxation if it's a single member. Okay. And so that's just kind of some of the brief overview of the formation matters. We do have a number of outlines as well as checklists that can help people make these types of assessments and advise our startups. You can move to the next slide, please. Another thing that we often work with are businesses that have two, or LLCs that have two or more members. It must have an operating agreement. That's something that we can draft for our clients. We have lots of examples of those, and it's a pretty standard document that we can get done for the person. But we like to make sure that they have everything in place, their EIN. There are often a lot of questions about fictitious business name, the DBA requirements, or doing business as, should they have more than one LLC or just have a DBA? That's a pretty common issue that we see, that we come across. And for a DBA, though, that's something that's registered with the Secretary of State as well. They're good for 5 years. And it's actually a crime in the state of Missouri to operate a DBA without properly filing it. So if you have a business and you're operating under some other name, and you don't actually have a DBA, that's an issue that a lot of times we have to advise our clients on. Oftentimes, in the course of either meeting with a new client or while we're already working with them, we'll find that they may need review of existing contracts that they have. We may need to draft new contracts or assist them with obtaining a business license, or at least in advising them that they need a business license to operate. The next slide addresses the common intellectual property needs of our clients. Now, I know that this may sound scary to those of us who may not have practiced in this area before, and it can be a nuanced area, but we have a ton of resources. We'd be happy to consult with any new attorneys in this area, and we'd be even happier if you are an experienced intellectual property attorney who would like to take on these types of matters. As I said, we don't do patents, but we do refer our clients to the USPTO Patent Pro Bono Program. We often encounter clients who may need copyrights. That's often an issue when hiring contractors to design websites or graphics. An issue that we often have to discuss with our client is a need to have that. If they're looking to gain intellectual property rights in material that has been designed by an outside contractor, we can help them get that, or at least seek to have ownership assigned. And that's called an assignment agreement, something that's very standard and that we have plenty of examples of. Another common thing is social media and websites. A lot of our clients need guidance on fair use and trademark use of graphics online. A lot of these issues will overlap with corporate issues like web designer contracts and data privacy. So in terms of trademarks, that is something we conduct the searches. We can follow that from beginning to end, and that can be a very lengthy process for those of you who don't practice in that area, but we're having fun. I'm speaking for myself, having fun learning that area. The next slide addresses some growing business needs that we're seeing amongst our client population. So we're seeing more and more labor and employment issues. So we have a great need for attorneys who may have some experience in this area. A common issue that we all are able to address, and we do with our clients, is the issue of having employees versus hiring independent contractors. That is a very big thing for a business. That's something that they need to consider in their business structure. We try to provide all of the, or we don't try to, we have to make sure that we inform our clients of all of their obligations in the hiring and firing process. If they're going to have employees, we can assist with drafting employee handbooks, as well as administering anti-discrimination advice. In terms of real estate, we have many of our clients need new commercial leases, so they'll need that lease reviewed. We've also assisted clients with negotiating or renegotiating leases. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. There's also a number of niche legal concerns that we come across, such as the municipal requirements for business licensing. So sometimes I can tell our clients they feel like they're kind of going down a rabbit hole with the different licensing, but it's just important that they're aware of all the licensing that they need to be able to operate. They need sales tax guidance, and we are able to provide that. We're not tax attorneys, so sometimes they may need more specialized advice. So it's good to have tax attorneys to volunteer. They often need regulatory guidance as well. As it relates to products, we do have quite a few clients who create their own products. And so it's important that we provide them with the proper guidance as it relates to that product labeling and any liability that can arise from that. Nonprofit legal issues. So as some of you may or may not know, there's a lot of governance that's involved, corporate governance that's involved with a not-for-profit. Not-for-profits do have to incorporate with the Secretary of State. They have to have articles of incorporation. They have to have bylaws. They have to identify at least a minimum of 3 directors for their board. And it also requires annual or biannual corporate registration. We often assist clients if they're not already tax exempt. A lot of nonprofits come to us seeking to apply for the tax exempt status. The purpose of the organization must not be to make money. You'd be surprised, but sometimes we have to really flesh that out to some clients. People have very creative ideas, but we have to make sure that their not-for-profit is meeting all of the standard requirements of a not-for-profit corporation. Profits must remain with the corporation and cannot be distributed to board members. That's something really big that we have to talk to our clients about. Sometimes, especially when you're dealing with a smaller not-for-profit or a sole person who's starting one, a lot of times the people that they have for ideas of board members are family members, and that's an issue. That's a problem that we have to talk to them about. You don't want to have conflicts. A not-for-profit corporation, it's important that they know that the members are not personally liable. They can receive public donations, and that donors may receive tax deductions. And so there's a little less flexibility in some of the requirements for a not-for-profit, but there's a lot of formalities there. But again, we have lots of resources. Good good to know, it's just good to know that to file for a not-for-profit, the fee can be anywhere from $275 to $800. And, that it just depends on which form you use. But the biggest thing is just that we make sure that our clients have all of their required documents, which again is articles of incorporation, bylaws, identify directors, identify the charitable purpose, and that they have a conflict of interest policy. Next, I'm going to hand things back over to Tracy James to talk about some of our successes and opportunities.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate it. As we're winding down this hour, I just wanted to kind of talk about some of the successes that the Microenterprise Program has seen or has been a part of since its inception in 2011. If we can go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. Giving a case study, for example, when this program was first created, one of the first pro bono attorneys was an attorney from Emerson and Emerson Electric, and they just kind of dipped their toe in the water to do some being part of a clinic, like when we had an on-site clinic, and what they just started kind of doing this, like, okay, this is good, this, I can handle this. They understood what the format was. They understood that it wasn't necessarily, there's a lot of issue spotting. They were very excited about this. And so they thought, well, we can go ahead and do some presentations as well. And then we had them going out to doing at least 2 different community partners that we were involved with. Justine Peterson is one, and then the other one was Grace Hill. But I wanted to kind of highlight the partnership with Grace Hill, with Justine Peterson, where we had this ongoing relationship. They understood what Justine Peterson was doing. So they would do like a presentation on general legal issues. Where this volunteer attorney maybe recruited some of his other attorneys in his law department to do some of these things, labor and employment, and also trademark. And so as they kind of got along, then they said, this isn't so bad. They're feeling comfortable because they're a little bit more familiar. There was these ongoing clinics and ongoing presentations. So we would have these scheduled these bi-monthly clinics with Justine Peterson, where they would do screening. And then sometimes, some of the attorneys at Emerson said, this is really kind of exciting, and I like some of the people, their business ideas and legal issues are intriguing. Maybe I could go ahead and take on a case. So they started taking on cases. So as you can see, over the years, they've really kind of participated, and I think I lost my screen there, participated in our program as the program grew and they got more involved. And then even to this day, I think that the whole organization, Emerson, was committed to some of our partners, our community partners, and maybe doing other things that were good for the community, and they really were invested in it. And then also, they would get rewarded for their participation in doing like a pro bono challenge, which BAMSL has, or that they would, really get involved where one of the members or one of the lawyers said, I'd like to be on Legal Services Board. So once they have a taste, they kind of drank the Kool-Aid, they start getting involved. But it was really kind of getting that toe dipped and getting it started, in that proverbial well to get that involvement. So that's where kind of this partnership is. And even to this day, it's 2020, we have a clinic with Emerson and Justine Peterson next week, where they kind of go through these different issues all the time in the screening. And it's just a great time. And we always encourage not just solos, but emeritus attorneys, retired attorneys, others that, and also firms especially, to either sponsor or be part of something and just see how it goes. But it can be pretty invigorating. So next slide. Giving you some ideas of some representative client success stories, and we're going to try and highlight those in our attorney newsletter, the distribution newsletter of some of our successes, because this is how we gauge success for our program and for funding, and also to just show, there's a longer runway for our kind of clients versus the typical legal aid clients, where you can you have the litigation, they're done, either won the case or they lost the case. But with us, it's kind of a lot harder, it's a lot longer of a runway to see how they're successful. So finally, when we see these things, and we always like our volunteer attorneys to let us know some of the successes that then they've been a part of, and then they can buy into, just all of this. But so you see some of these right here where there was certain types of stuff, and then where we did certain legal things. And this is where, we did this, and you find that they have more issues, but, they're also, you see the success where they might get those grants, or that they are recognized as an outstanding entrepreneur in the St. Louis community, or that they have some really interesting ideas. But, success might be for them is that they're providing wealth for their families or jobs, or they're just really, really meeting the need that the community is looking for. Next slide. And thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Tracy. I think this is the part where Julie's going to talk about some of our upcoming pro bono opportunities.
Yeah, so one of the things that I have included in your packet with you is a whole listing of pro bono opportunities. So some of them are cases. You might be seeing that case summary that we usually send in our newsletter email for Ms. R, who needs some litigation assistance right now, as one example. There's also a list of daytime issue spotting clinics. Every week we are hosting clinics so we can do some of those initial intakes for clients. So if you have daytime availability, or actually if you have evening availability too, we have evening clinics most weeks. So there's a full listing of opportunities depending on your schedule and how you can help out. But in general too, we have 3 community partners who are seeking long-term legal partnerships like that Emerson and Justine Peterson one. So if you are looking to, reach minority business owners, the Urban League Save Our Sisters program could really use some focus from a law firm or from a corporation. We also have 2 library programs now that are expanding and looking for people who can present. They are looking for people to staff clinics and to help grow the clients there. So there's several presentation opportunities. The second week in February is National Entrepreneur Week. And so we are hoping to have a grouping of presentations and programs, but we need volunteers now so we can start planning for that. So again, look at your course materials, see if there's an opportunity to help out, and let us know where you can. And then our email address is ced@lsem.org, and you can reach all of us that way and our full team. And if there's any additional questions, I'm going to open it back up.
Please, if you do have questions, you could go ahead and put it in the chat, or if you want to somehow unmute yourself, that's fine too, and ask a question of us. One of the ones before we leave is, how do you deal with clients where English is not their primary language? Do we usually give those out to pro bono attorneys, or do we keep that in-house when they need some translation assistance? So
is that a question? Is that for me?
That could be for anybody in our team, but that's just kind of giving you an example when we do have those. If you don't know it, I can answer it. So
no, certainly if someone does not primarily speak English, we have to make sure we have an ethical obligation to make sure that we get the appropriate translation services for that individual. However, the question spoke to a very great point. We have a need for attorneys who do speak more than one language. That would be excellent if we have dedicated attorneys that speak Spanish or other languages. Please let us know if you have those skills, and so that we can utilize you when we do get cases like that.
And then another question is, how do we receive the newsletter that has been spoken about?
So,
thank you for,
yeah.
Go ahead, Julie. I was just gonna volley that to you.
So I'm actually one of the people who helps draft the newsletter. So if you are wanting to sign up, message me. I can make sure everybody signed up today for this session receives the newsletter. But if you also want to message me too, rather than forward it on to a new person, that way we can get the new signups and recognize new volunteers. So that way we can expand our reach there and know who exactly is interested in our program.
And one last question is, how has your program pivoted during COVID? Do you still see people face to face?
That's an excellent question. And the funny thing about that is that I started working for legal services post-COVID. So Tracy might be able to speak a little bit more, but I mean, obviously right now we are unable to meet with clients in person. We have had to transition to a remote system where we have a remote desktop to make sure that we are able to keep all of our clients' information confidential, and that everything is being saved on a secure server. But we have been pretty successful, at least in my experience, with being able to meet with clients pretty regularly and communicate with our clients by phone, as well as email. But when we have our client meetings, I try to have that somewhat face-to-face aspect by meeting with them via Teams or via Zoom, just depending on their preference.
And we do
Yeah,
that with our clinics too. So any of these things that we're talking about, presentations, clinics, all of those are virtual right now, and our offices are actually remaining closed into 2021, date to be determined. So we foresee this happening for quite a while going forward.
Right. And then the other thing is that our clients can usually reach us, if not by Microsoft Teams or here on Zoom, but we also have a telephone number, a 1-800 number that we can always provide. And that has always been, something that we try and meet the client where they're at. And then I had one other question. Where are your clients located generally? Do you have a geographic distribution of where they're at?
Yes, we serve both St. Louis City and County, as well as some of the surrounding areas. As you can see on the screen, we have a couple of other offices in both Union and Hannibal. So we also reach those service areas as well. Me and Julie, we mostly work with the North County clients, or any county clients, I should say. And then the other half of our staff works with the city and other clients. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Tracy.
Yeah, basically, from what we found is that maybe a little bit more of our clients come from the county, but if they do, they come from maybe North County. And then we have a large percentage that come from the city of St. Louis. And then we have others like Franklin County, St. Charles. We really can be able to kind of pivot that way. I mean, we've had some even farther out in the more rural communities, and that's where the virtual platforms really seem to help. But yeah, it's just usually it's really interesting, as one of the other statistics showed, that I'd say a large portion of our client base are Black entrepreneurs, a lot of women, and so and they tend to be trending younger. So, I mean, it's just kind of a really fascinating thing that we really like to be at the forefront of all this. And I always say that what Microenterprise does is kind of like special forces for legal aid. It's not out there everywhere, but we're really privileged to be able to working with our client community. And we hope that you can see how that works too.
Thank you, Tracy.
So I think we have any other questions. So Stephanie, do you want to close it out?
If we don't have any other questions, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I look forward to meeting each and every one of you. If you have an opportunity to volunteer, please feel free to reach out. If you're not sure what you want to do, still reach out, and we can get some ideas and get something going. But I look forward to connecting with all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.